I'm Nikki and welcome to the Preppy Possum. Today I'm going to lead you step by step through a painting. All right, we're going to paint kind of like a funky flower, a vintage looking flower. So let's start by grabbing like a pretty good big brush. It's like a number 6 or number 8, and dry it off. And let's grab kind of like some dark pink to start out with. And we're gonna throw a big bumpy circle. You could do it off-centered if you want. I'm probably gonna do it like mostly in the center, but just a big bumpy circle. All right, so we kind of got it on there. So just grab a bunch of dark pink and we're just gonna fill it all in. So grab a bunch of paint just to get it on there. And you could start with the background first if you wanted to. I'm just doing this that way I can kind of paint the background around it. All right, so you have us a layer on there with kind of like a little magenta or something, a little dark pink. And now I'm gonna grab a little bit of like a really dark purple with even a tiny bit of black, and I'm gonna throw like a little dark center on there. So just kind of bump you. And it's fine if you can still see a little bit of the pink. We'll come back and bump a little bit again. And then once you get a dark circle in there, just kind of wipe off your extra. And let's grab some red. And right around the purple, we're gonna do like a few little red spirals. So kind of think like cinnamon roll, but like messier. So grab some red, and the pink is still a little wet, so that's fine. And we're just gonna throw a little bit of red right around the middle. Okay, and then once we have some red, let's just grab kind of that dark pink again with a little bit of like a bubblegum pink and even a little salmon color. And we're gonna go ahead and throw some little spirals kind of right outside of that red. And don't worry that your dark pink's still super duper wet, because we're gonna come back and spiral a bunch more. But while that's wet, I would just kind of grab like some bubble gum and salmon kind of pink and just kind of do a messy spiral. Maybe even grab a teeny bit of really light pink with it. All right, so I think we have us, at least we have our little circle on there, and started getting a little bit of messy paint on there. So we'll go ahead, and while we still have, let's go ahead and wipe that one off and chunk it in the water and grab a little bit smaller brush. So maybe like a number 6, and dry it off. And let's grab some really dark green. And we're gonna go ahead and throw a few leaves on here. So some of our bigger leaves. So down here at the bottom right, I'm gonna throw like a huge, you want these to be like a little bit bigger towards the flower, and then you want them to be kind of skinnier towards the end. So the trick is to load your brush with a lot of paint and then just be real light with it. But we're gonna come back and paint the background up next to it, so don't worry if it gets too crazy. But once you get that first one on there, then just kind of fill it in with a layer of green, because we'll come back and add more to it. And just take it all the way up next to your flower. You don't want to leave any white in between. And we might throw like another, a little bit smaller one right next to it. And then let's throw like a couple more big leaves, like maybe one coming off up here. Big leaf up here at the top too. So now that we have like the start to those leaves, let's go ahead and wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. Let's let it dry for just a second. All right, so now that we let our flower dry just a little bit, let's go ahead and grab like a huge brush. It's like a 1-inch brush. And the background of this one is kind of like a slate gray, so it has like a little bit of blue in it. So I would use some like dark gray. If you want this color, you could do whatever color. I think it would look pretty with a bunch of different colors on the background. But if you wanted this, I would use like some dark gray with maybe even a little bit of a chalky blue. Just a little bit to give you like that slate kind of color. And then it's gonna dry a little bit darker than it goes on. So we're gonna put this on and kind of see what it dries like. But I would use the big brush and whatever color background and kind of hit all your big areas first, just to give your flower and your leaves another second to dry. And when you're doing this background, don't worry about like which way your brush strokes go. Just as long as you're getting kind of a layer on all the white is all that matters. But I would leave at least 1/4 inch around your leaves, around your flower, because we'll come back with a little bit smaller to get up next to it. So now we have most of our background with a layer. So now let's just wipe that one off, chunk it in the water, and let's grab a little bit bigger size brush, like a number 6 or something, and dry it off. And we're gonna use that same color and get all the way up next to everything. Now we're going to take it like all the way up next to our leaves and up next to the flower. Whenever you're doing this, kind of load your brush with a lot of paint and then be real light, and that's how you'll get a smooth edge. Even though on this like flower and leaves we can go back over them again anyway, but that's how you get a smooth edge without it being too frayed. Don't worry if you're chopping off like too much of your flower, because we'll take some of that light right back over the edge of it in a second. All right, so now we got all of our background. So we're gonna let that dry for a second. So just kind of wipe that one off, and let's grab some more of like the purple, the really dark purple with a little bit of black, and we're gonna bump some more of that in through the middle, because it looks good to have a real dark center. And then just kind of wipe that one off, and we're gonna grab some more of maybe like even the red with a little bit of purple, and throw a few little wiggles of that right on the edge. And that got it a little bit darker, and then grab some of the red and dark pink together to give you like a really dark pink. And we're gonna kind of go on the edge, because we're going kind of like dark to light. And when you're doing stuff like this, like the more little wiggles you have, the better. You just don't want to over blend it. You kind of want to be able to see all the colors. All right, so we have some red and some dark pink together. Then now let's grab more of like that, kind of like a salmon-y pink, and throw a few wiggles with that. So more like a salmon-y pink, and you can even have some light pink with it, but just right there on the edge. Of where it touches. I shouldn't take it quite to the edge yet since it's still wet, so I'll get like all these little parts through the middle first. But just kind of load your brush with a lot of paint, and then just kind of be real light and wiggly with it. And since our gray is still a little wet, we'll probably come back to the edge and hit that again. I don't want to get the gray too smeared in. So let's let it dry for another second. We're getting it looking a little bit better. And just wipe that one off. And while we have that same size brush, like a number 6, let's go ahead and throw another layer through these big leaves. So just kind of right through the middle without making them like too much bigger. we're just kind of thickening up our paint. All right, so now we kind of got us another layer through the dark ones, and while they're still wet, I would even grab some like lighter greens, kind of like a Kelly green, and even some really like limey, slimy green, and throw you a little bit of light through there while it's still wet. And we can come back and throw some more light on it later too, but just to get us a few little streaks. It's easier to blend when it's still wet, kind of the wet on wet technique. So I would do like a little bit of that through all of them while they're still wet. Okay, so we got us a little bit of streaks, some streaks through all of them, which is good. Okay, so let's go ahead and wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. And now let's grab a little bit smaller, so like a number 4, and dry it off. And let's skip over here to the left, and let's grab maybe like some seafoam with some medium green. I think that'll give us like a good lighter green kind of color. So some seafoam, like a bluish green with some of that like Kelly kind of green. And we'll skip over here towards the left, and let's start with like some long skinny leaves. I know your background's still a little wet, so we'll kind of draw them on there first, and then we can come back and thicken them. And you could even have like a little bit of a stem kind of connect it. So these you want more kind of like skinny through the ends. So it's skinny like through both sides and kind of chunkier through the middle. So we have the start of that. Let's let our background dry, and then we can fill that in a little bit. So let's wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. All right, now let's just go ahead, since I got a little bit more dry, so let's go ahead and grab like a number 4 again, and we're just gonna fill in those leaves we had drawn on there. So some seafoam and some like Kelly green, and just kind of fill them in with a layer. And I'm using this size brush so that way I can get like smaller through the points. So when you're in the middle of the leaf, you can kind of grab a little bit more and put it on there, and then kind of spread it around. And then just like we did with the dark leaves, as soon as we have these all filled in, then we'll go back and streak with like a little bit of dark and some slimy limey, just to give them, so they won't be flat, so it won't be just one color. Then, so once we have it filled in, I'm just grabbing some dark green, or kind of like the darker greens together, and just throw like a little glare of that on like one side of all of these. And then you can do the same thing with like some slimy limey in that medium green. Throw you just like a little bit of that. All right, so we got us a little bit of contrast going on, which is good. So let's wipe that one off, and now we're gonna skip down here to the bottom left. So grab like the two darker greens together, and we're gonna skip down here, and I'm gonna start with like a little sprig kind of off of there, just like a little. And then once you have your little sprig on there, then we're gonna throw some little leaves off of there. So kind of using the two greens. And you just want them to be kind of just like these, but a lot smaller version. So you can use this brush or the teeny tiny. Noticing I was kind of making them all a little perfect, so I was bending some a few different ways so they wouldn't be all exactly the same. All right, but I think I got a little sprig down there. And then while we still have this brush, let's skip to like the bottom right here. And I'm just gonna throw like two little stems. I'm probably gonna let one lean to the left, with mostly that dark green. And then I'm gonna throw another one, and I'm gonna let it kind of like lean to the right a little bit more. You can get a little bit bigger towards the bottom, because then we're gonna add some little buds on there. And I'm gonna do something similar up here at the top, kind of right to the left of my big leaf. I'm gonna throw like a dark little stem, and then kind of throw one to the right too. And okay, so we have the start to the darks, so that's good. Let's wipe that one off and chunk it in the water, and let's grab a teeny tiny brush. So you want to grab one that doesn't have a color on top and dry it off, and let's start with like some darker greens again. So teeny tiny and darker greens. And up here at the top, I would throw like a few little sprigs, think kind of like evergreen. So you want to start with a little line. I'm gonna have this one jump over that leaf. So start with that line, and then we're just gonna do little sprigs that come off of there. So you always wanna start from the center and come off with your stroke. And I'm gonna throw them on there with dark first. Then we can come back and throw some lights. Mine might both have to kind of because I just think this one looks good having like a bunch of different greenery kind of like going around our little flower. So as you're coming up, you want your little sprigs to get smaller. All right, so we got some on there with dark there. Let's go ahead and throw like a little piece of that same kind of motion down here, a little one. Always start from the middle and come out with your stroke. All right, let's go ahead now and grab some slimy limey with some medium, and we're gonna come back in and throw a few slimy limey little pieces right in here where we did our dark one. So just kind of in between. Don't try to be like too perfect with it though. Kind of skip around and just, so some of them can hit on the dark ones we did before and some of them. But we're just doing that same kind of motion, and like you want to hit all those little evergreen sprigs. So it has some darks and some lights. And then you can throw a little bit of light through those little stems we threw on there too. Then while you still have the teeny tiny and those lighter greens, let's go ahead and skip back up here to the top left. And we're gonna throw some little pieces, like come from the leaves out. That way the thinnest part of your stroke will be towards the outside. And we're gonna throw just some little pieces because we're gonna come back and throw some little buds on there. But you just wanna be really light and piecey. So load your brush with a lot of paint. Be real light. So real light and piecey. Because it doesn't have to be a perfect line. But I would have some coming out from in between like our leaves, so it's like it's coming from here. And then I would even have a few like right here where we don't have anything, have a sprig, like a few sprigs of greenery, because we'll come back and add our little buds on there. Let's see, let's go ahead and add, it has just a little bit of greenery like down here, even though it doesn't have any buds. We'll throw just a little bit, a few little pieces. And then maybe a little bit coming, so anywhere like in between your leaves where you still have a little bit of room. And then let's throw some over here, some long sprigs. And then up here, because I'm gonna save a little bit of space for a few more different kind of sprigs. But right here in between these big leaves, I would throw a little bit more. And let's see, let's throw just a few little pieces because it's almost like that greenery would come up there. Okay, I think we have a lot of little, and while you have that little brush with the lighter greens, I would even throw you like a few streaks through this little sprig just to give you some lights. Just like a quick little glare. All right, so that's a good start to that green. Let's go ahead and use the slimy limey, and we're gonna throw the start of our next little greenery. Then I can come back with a yellow handle and add the little bumps. But like over here and then up top, well, and down here actually, we're gonna start with like a little sprig. And then you can throw just a few little, we'll come back and throw little pieces off of it. So I'm gonna do the same thing up here. I'm gonna do like a couple little sprigs. and come back and throw. And then down here. But now I'm gonna wipe that one off and chunk it in the water, and I'm gonna grab a little bit bigger brush, so like a number 4, and dry it off. And we're still gonna use those same 2 lighter greens. And now we're gonna add like some little greenery. It kind of looks like a little teardrop or something, and they can get like a little bit bigger. But your greenery, you can do it however. I'm just doing that kind of shape just to have like a little bit of different greenery going on. And then I like to let them get like smaller towards the end, like the little pieces. And then I would do the same thing like up here to these. Throw some little, or you could just do bumps if you wanted to too. That would kind of give it the same look. All right, so, and then while you have that, I would even grab a little bit of medium green, and the ones we just did, throw just a little glare through that too. It's just easier while they're still wet to go ahead and do a little glare. Makes it look more natural too. All right, so we have a good start to our greenery. So let's wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. So now let's grab like a number 6 or something, number 4, number 6, and dry it off. And we're gonna grab like some darker pinks, and we're gonna throw our little buds on those little stems that we have. We're gonna throw it on there with dark first, and then we can come back with a little bit of light. So kind of start from the stem and just throw you some little pieces that go away from it. All right, so we have a start to our dark ones. So let's wipe that one off. We're gonna give them just a second to dry. So wipe that brush off a little bit and grab some of that salmony pink with even a little bit of really light pink. And now we're gonna add just some little dabs for like giving the impression of little buds to all of our little greenery, or most of our greenery that we threw on there. So kind of skip around, and we're just gonna do some little dabs. And I think it looks good to do them in little clusters, so that way it won't give like the polka dot effect. It'll kind of look more like a spray, more like a real flower if you do a few together in a few places. You can have some that are on their own, but gonna do the same thing, like maybe over here through the top right and the bottom right. So throw you just a few. You just don't want any of your circles or your little dabs to look too perfect. So kind of just barely touch, be real light, because you're just kind of dabbing. And then just so these look maybe a little bit different, I might grab a little bit of the bubblegum pink with it, just to add a little bit darker so they don't look exactly the same as the ones on the right. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of bubblegum with that salmon color and throw just a few little dabs of that in there with it. All right, I think we got a little crazier. Then I might even grab a little bit more of that light pink, even a little bit of white, and you could even throw like just a few, barely, through a few places. So the light pink with a little white, just to get some really light. And then you can even do that to your little buds, kind of through the top. We're just gonna throw, I would leave them darker towards the bottom and just kind of throw this light more towards the top. But it's fine that your dark is still a little wet. That way it won't look too perfect when you're putting it on there. Okay, so we have our funky little buds going. Now, since the edge of our flower is probably dry, hopefully, let's grab like a little bit of the light pink and white. And we're gonna throw like a little bit of that. You don't want it to be a perfect line, but a few little messy wiggles of that towards the outside edge. So I like to kind of skip in and throw a few too, so it won't just be like you're throwing it on the very outside. And then once you have that, then grab some more of that salmon kind of pink, and you'll just throw a few salmon ones. It's fine that you still have a little bit of the really light. And then we'll even grab a little bit of that hot pink and dark pink and do a few of that one. And then the hot pink and red. And remember, you're doing like less of these than we did in the beginning, because it looks good to kind of see all the colors. And then we'll even grab some of the red and purple and throw a few of those. Even the red by itself, maybe too. And then I would even take a little bit of purple, and you could bump just a little bit of that purple kind of by itself through the middle. I think that kind of made it look a little better. And then the only other thing is, I think our leaves could be thickened up just a tiny bit, so I'm gonna hit those real quick with maybe like a little bit more, that same brush, just kind of wipe it off a tad, and grab some lighter greens. And I'm gonna throw a little bit of lighter through just a little bit of our leaves. We can come back and blend it with a little dark. But once you have some streaks of light, then grab some more of that dark, and we'll just kind of blend it in. Our leaves just still looked a little too perfect and a little too dark, so it looks good to have some streaks going on in there. So anywhere where you got a little heavy, it's easier to blend when it's all wet. All right. I think that's pretty good. You can come back and kind of tweak anything you need to, but let's go ahead and use that teeny tiny brush and dry it off. And we'll sign this puppy. And now we have a little vintage floral. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to check us out. We're on Cox Street in Asheboro. And be sure to check out our website, www.thepreppypossum.com.